Once upon a time, there was a young woman named Evelyn who never left a job half done. If a stray dog had a cut on its ear, she stayed out in the rain until she wrapped it in a clean cloth. If her neighbor's roof leaked, she was up on the rusty ladder holding the nails. She did not do these things to be nice or to hear people say thank you. Around her was broken. That was just who she was. But on this particular evening, Evelyn felt completely broken herself. She stood in the middle of her stepmother's massive kitchen, staring down at a shiny white piece of paper on the marble counter. The kitchen smelled like expensive vanilla candles and roasting meat, but the air felt so thick and hot that Evelyn could barely breathe. Her throat was dry, and she kept squeezing the hem of her faded blue skirt until her knuckles turned white. Across the counter stood Victoria, her stepmother. Victoria was not screaming. Instead, she was slowly cutting a piece of chocolate cake with a silver fork, making a tiny scratching sound against the plate. Scratch, scratch. She looked up at Evelyn with cold, calm eyes. Victoria said that if Evelyn did not sign the marriage paper by midnight, the checks for the hospital would stop. She said the private room where Evelyn's grandmother lived would be locked, the machines that helped the old woman breathe would be turned off, and she would be sent to a crowded, noisy state clinic where nobody would watch her. Evelyn felt a hot drop of sweat slide down her neck. She looked at the paper, then at the silver fork in Victoria's hand. She asked why it had to be him. She asked why it had to be the silent man who lived in the alley behind their big house. Victoria took a slow bite of her cake, chewed it, and wiped her mouth with a cloth napkin. She told Evelyn that the family business was going through a very difficult time. She said that according to her father's old will, the family could only touch the grandmother's medical trust fund money if Evelyn was legally married and settled. Victoria smiled a tiny, sharp smile. She said she was just finding Evelyn a husband so they could get the money to save the business. It did not matter who the husband was, as long as he signed the certificate. And the man in the alley was perfect because he had no family, no money, and no voice to complain. Evelyn did not cry. She took a deep breath, picked up the black pen from the counter, and held it tight. She told Victoria that she would sign it, but only if Victoria signed a different paper first. Evelyn pulled a small notebook page from her pocket. She had written down a promise that Victoria must pay for the grandmother's hospital room for the next 5 years. No matter what happened to the business. Victoria stopped smiling. She looked at the small notebook page, then at Evelyn's stubborn chin. For a long minute, the only sound in the kitchen was the loud ticking of the gold clock on the wall. Victoria snatched the pen, signed Evelyn's notebook page with a hard stroke, and pushed the marriage certificate forward. Evelyn signed her own name at the bottom. Her hand was shaking, but her lines were straight. Evelyn took the official papers, walked out of the back door, and stepped into the cold night air. The luxury of the mansion disappeared instantly. The alley was dark, narrow, and smelled like wet garbage and old bricks. A yellow street lamp flickered overhead, making a low, buzzing noise that sounded like an angry insect. She walked past the big green trash bins until she reached a small corner covered by a plastic blue tarp. Sitting on a crate under the tarp was Julian. He wore a heavy, torn brown coat that was covered in dirt. His hair was long and messy, and a thick beard hid most of his face. He was holding a small piece of wood and scraping it with a blunt pocket knife, making tiny wooden shavings fall onto his knees. Evelyn knelt down on the damp concrete in front of him. The ground was freezing, and the chill went straight through her skirt. Julian did not look up. He just kept scraping the wood, his hands moving in steady, slow circles. Evelyn did not know that under that dirty coat, Julian's muscles were tight and ready. 3 expensive black cars were parked in the dark, filled with men in suits waiting for Julian to type a single message on a hidden phone. Julian was the richest man in the country, the head of a massive company called Apex Industries. He was living in this alley on purpose to find out which of his workers were stealing millions of dollars from his charity funds. He had spent weeks pretending to be a man who could not speak, watching the dark side of the city. Evelyn reached out and gently touched the rough sleeve of his coat. She told him that she needed his help. She said she needed him to marry her. Julian stopped scraping the wood. He did not look at her face yet, but his fingers gripped the knife a little tighter. Evelyn pulled out the marriage certificate and laid it on the wooden crate between them. She spoke quickly, her voice small but clear in the quiet alley. She told him that it was a fake marriage. She said they would not have to live like real couples. She promised that she would buy him hot food every single day, give him a warm place to sleep on her floor, and buy him a new coat for the winter. She said she just needed his name on the paper so her grandmother could stay in the hospital. Julian finally raised his head. His eyes were not dull or confused like the eyes of the other people who lived on the streets. They were bright, sharp, and deep. He looked at the white paper. Then he looked at Evelyn's face. He saw the red marks on her knees from the cold concrete. He saw the smudge of dirt on her cheek and the fierce, protective look in her eyes. For weeks, people had walked past Julian and kicked his feet, thrown trash at him, or ignored him completely. Evelyn was the only person who had ever brought him a warm meat pie and asked him his name. Julian did not say a word. He closed his pocket knife with a sharp click and put it in his pocket. He took the pen from Evelyn's hand. His fingers were rough and stained with charcoal, but he held the pen with absolute steadiness. He wrote his name, Julian Vance, on the line at the bottom of the paper. His handwriting was beautiful, sharp, and elegant, not like the writing of a man who had never gone to school. Evelyn let out a long breath she had been holding for hours. She took the paper back and looked at his signature. She told him thank you, and she promised again that she would take care of him. Julian just nodded once and sat back down on his crate. As Evelyn turned to walk away to prepare for the morning, Julian reached into his coat pocket and tapped a tiny, black button on a hidden device. The screen flashed once in the dark. He watched her walk out of the alley, his sharp eyes following her every step, realizing that his undercover mission had just become a lot more complicated. The next evening, the main dining room of the mansion looked like a glittering jewelry box. Gold-rimmed plates sat on a long white tablecloth, and a giant glass light hung from the high ceiling, casting bright sparks over everything. The air smelled like expensive roasted fish and sweet lemon butter, but it felt heavy and cold to Evelyn. Victoria had ordered Evelyn to come to dinner, and she had specifically told her to bring her new husband along. Victoria said it was a family celebration, but Evelyn knew it was just another way to make her feel small. Before they walked into the bright room, Evelyn had tried her best to help Julian clean up in the dim hallway. She had used a wet paper towel to gently wipe a smudge of dark dirt from his jawline, and she had used her own plastic comb to smooth down his wild, messy hair. But there was only so much she could do. His brown coat was still torn at the shoulder, his shirt was faded, and his old boots were worn so thin that they looked grey. Evelyn held Julian's arm tightly, trying to show her family that she was not ashamed of him. Priscilla arrived a few minutes later, and she did not walk into the room quietly. She practically bounced across the polished wooden floor, her high heels making loud clicking sounds against the wood. She held her left hand high in the air, waving it around so that the giant diamond on her finger would catch the light from the ceiling. Behind her walked Marcus Vane. Marcus wore a shiny black suit that looked like it cost more than Evelyn's apartment, and a gold watch that was much too large for his wrist. He had a big, smug smile on his face, the kind of smile that belonged to someone who thought he was better than every other human being on earth. Priscilla ran over and slammed her hand down on the table right next to Evelyn's plate, making the silver spoons rattle against the cloth. She demanded that Evelyn look at the ring right that second. She said that Marcus had bought it for her, because Marcus was the most important man at Vane Logistics, and he only bought the absolute best for his future bride. Priscilla laughed a sharp, mean laugh and said that the diamond was so heavy it was making her wrist hurt, but she supposed she would just have to get used to the billionaire lifestyle. Pulling his coat sleeves up so his heavy gold watch slid out for everyone to see, he looked over at Julian, who was sitting perfectly still with his hands folded in his lap. Marcus let out a short, loud chuckle and shook his head. He asked Victoria if this was the joke husband she had found for Evelyn, or if they had accidentally let a stray worker inside the house. He wondered out loud if Julian even knew how to use a silver fork, or if he usually just grabbed his food straight out of the garbage bins behind the shops. Priscilla joined in, leaning against Marcus's shoulder and smiling widely. She told Evelyn that she felt so incredibly sorry for her. She said that while Evelyn was going to spend the rest of her life washing dirty rags and counting pennies to buy bread, She was going to be flying to beautiful islands on private airplanes and buying a new mansion every single year. Priscilla told her that Marcus was a real man with a real future, unlike the silent shadow sitting next to Evelyn. Evelyn gripped her cloth napkin under the table so hard that her fingers turned white. The anger inside her was growing hot, like a small fire in her chest. She did not want to cause a huge fight, because she needed Victoria to keep her promise about the hospital bills. But she could not sit there and let them insult Julian. She looked Priscilla straight in the eyes and spoke in a clear, firm voice. Evelyn said that a real marriage was not about how much money a man had in his bank account, or how many shiny things he could buy. She said it was about kindness and keeping promises, and she told them that Julian was a good man who did not deserve their mean words. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and narrowing his eyes at Evelyn. He asked her if she was trying to be funny. He told her that in the real business world, money was the only thing that mattered, and people without money were completely invisible. He began to brag loudly about his job, telling Victoria that the big bosses at the main headquarters of a giant company called Apex Industries were giving him millions of dollars to manage because he was so smart. Marcus said that he was about to move a massive amount of money for them, and his personal bonus would be enough to buy a whole fleet of sports cars. Julian did not move a single muscle, but his sharp eyes were locked onto Marcus's face. He recognized Marcus instantly. Julian did not just know about Apex Industries. He was the master of it. He owned every single desk, computer, and building in that entire global company. And he knew exactly who Marcus Vane really was. Marcus was not a big boss or a rich heir to a throne. Marcus was just a regular numbers worker, a low-level accountant who worked in a small, dark back room at one of Julian's smallest regional offices. Julian remembered seeing Marcus's name on a secret corporate report just 3 days before he went undercover. The report said that someone was secretly stealing millions of dollars from the special charity fund meant to buy toys and medicine for poor children, and Marcus was the main suspect. As Marcus kept talking big, boasting about how he just ordered a brand new luxury boat and a custom sports car, Julian looked closely at the gold watch on Marcus's wrist. Julian realized the truth right then. The money used to buy that watch, and the giant diamond on Priscilla's finger, was the exact money that had been stolen from Julian's own charity company. Victoria smiled warmly at Marcus, completely ignoring Evelyn and Julian, as if they were pieces of broken furniture. She raised her glass of sparkling juice and made a loud toast to Priscilla and her wealthy future. She said she was so glad that at least one of her daughters was bringing pride and true riches to the family name. Marcus raised his glass too, looking over the rim to give Julian a mocking wink. Julian slowly reached down and picked up his own water glass. He did not drink from it. He just held it, his grip so incredibly strong that his fingers did not shake even a little bit. He looked at Marcus with a quiet, dangerous expression that Marcus was too foolish to notice. Julian knew that every single dollar Marcus was bragging about was part of a trap that was about to snap shut. He decided right then that he would let Marcus keep stealing for just a little bit longer, right until the day of the big joint wedding party, so that the final fall would completely ruin Marcus and the greedy stepfamily all at once. The courthouse basement was cold and smelled like old wet paper. The walls were painted a dull gray color that made the room look dark even though the white lights on the ceiling were turned on. Victoria stood near the heavy wooden door, constantly tapping the toe of her shiny black shoe against the floor. Tap, tap, tap. She looked down at her gold watch every 10 seconds and complained loudly that the wedding judge was taking too much time for a ceremony that did not even matter. Priscilla stood right next to her mother, holding her phone high in the air with a big grin. She was recording a live video for all her friends online, turning the camera toward Evelyn and Julian, who were sitting together on a hard metal bench. Priscilla spoke into her phone in a loud, fake voice so that everyone in the hallway could hear her. She told her online followers to look at the sad couple sitting on the bench. She laughed and said that this was officially the cheapest wedding in the history of the world, because the groom did not even have a clean shirt to wear for his big day. She pointed the phone camera straight at Julian's old boots, making a big show of zooming in on the deep holes in the leather where his toes almost showed through. She asked her viewers to leave a comment if they thought Evelyn had found her new husband inside a trash can behind a grocery store. Evelyn stood up from the hard metal bench and walked right into the front of the phone camera, completely blocking Priscilla's view. She told Priscilla to put the phone away right now. She said that this was a serious government office, not a school playground for mean jokes. Evelyn's voice was shaking with anger, but she stood tall and did not back down. She said that they were here to sign the legal papers, and that was the only thing Victoria needed to save the family business, so there was absolutely no reason to film them like animals in a zoo. Victoria stepped between the two sisters, her voice sharp and cold. She told Evelyn to shut her mouth and stop making a scene in public. She said that Evelyn should be deeply grateful that the family was even paying the small fee to hire the wedding judge today. Victoria warned her that if she caused any more trouble or made Priscilla upset, the money for her grandmother's private hospital bed would disappear before the sun went down. She told Evelyn to sit back down on the bench, keep her mouth closed, and let Priscilla do whatever she wanted with her phone. Just then, a tired-looking judge opened the office door and told them all to come inside. The room was tiny and cluttered with tall stacks of paper that reached all the way to the ceiling. The ceremony took less than 3 minutes because nobody brought flowers or music. The judge did not ask them to say beautiful vows or exchange shiny gold rings. He just asked them to sign their names on 3 different copies of a white form. Priscilla laughed loudly from the back of the room, saying that the judge should check his pockets afterward to make sure the beggar did not steal the pen. Julian did not say a word, but his big fingers gripped the plastic pen so tightly that it made a small cracking sound. He signed his name quickly and handed the paper back. Once the judge stamped the final papers, Victoria and Priscilla left the room without even saying goodbye, their loud voices fading away as they talked about buying a much bigger, better wedding dress for Priscilla's future wedding with Marcus. They left Evelyn and Julian standing completely alone in the cold basement. Evelyn turned to Julian and told him that the hard part was over and it was time to go home. They walked out of the building and into the chilly evening air. A light rain had started to fall, making the city streets look dark and slippery. Evelyn did not have enough money to pay for a taxi car, so they had to walk 6 long blocks to her apartment building. She held her old umbrella high over Julian's head to keep his torn coat from getting soaked by the rain, even though the cold water dripped directly onto her own shoulders and made her shiver. Old brick building that sat near the noisy train tracks. The wooden stairs creaked loudly under their boots as they walked up 4 flights in the dim light. When Evelyn finally unlocked the door and pushed it open, the small room smelled like old wood and sweet cinnamon tea. It was a very tiny space. There was only a tiny stove in the corner, a single wooden chair, a lumpy brown couch, and a small single bed pushed against the far wall. High up on the ceiling, a tiny drop of rainwater was slowly forming, eventually falling with a soft plop into a plastic blue bucket Evelyn had placed on the floor. Evelyn locked the door behind them and let out a long, tired sigh. She told Julian that it was not a grand palace like her stepmother's house, but it was safe, and nobody in this room would ever yell at him or call him mean names. She told him to take off his wet coat so he would not catch a cold. Julian stood still for a moment. Then he slowly slid the heavy, dirty brown coat off his shoulders. Underneath the rags, his chest and arms were big and strong, and he stood very straight. He looked around the tiny room with sharp, intelligent eyes, noticing the leaking ceiling, the single mug on the counter, and finally looking back at Evelyn. Evelyn fetched a small plastic box from underneath her bed. Inside the box were different colored threads and some scraps of clean cloth. She sat down on the single wooden chair and asked Julian to hand her his coat. She told him that she could not let her new husband walk around the city with a giant rip in his shoulder. Julian handed her the heavy fabric and sat down on the edge of the couch, watching her closely. She began to work, her fingers moving quickly and carefully in the dim light of the single lamp. She threaded a thick black string through the needle and started to sew the torn edges of his sleeve back together. As she worked, she talked to him in a soft, gentle voice, even though she knew he would not answer her back. She told him that she knew her family was very cruel to him today. She apologized for Priscilla's phone video and said that her sister only cared about things that sparkled and cost a lot of money. Evelyn looked up from her sewing and looked straight into Julian's dark eyes. She told him that a person's true worth did not come from their clothes or their bank account, and she promised that as long as he lived under her roof, she would always treat him with respect. Julian sat perfectly still, watching her small hands move over his old coat. Inside his mind, his thoughts were rushing like a river. For his whole life, every single person he met wanted something from him. Women wanted his fancy sports cars, businessmen wanted his billions of dollars, and his workers wanted his corporate power. They all smiled at him because he was the richest man in the country. A girl who had almost nothing, sitting under a leaking roof, using her own time and her own thread to fix a coat for a man she thought was just a poor beggar. She did not want his money because she did not even know he had a single dollar. She was doing this simply because she saw someone who was cold, and her heart told her to fix it. Evelyn finished the last stitch, pulled the thread tight, and cut it with a small pair of scissors. She handed the coat back to Julian and told him to try it on. The giant rip was completely gone, replaced by a neat, strong line of black stitches. Julian slid his arms back into the sleeves. The coat felt warm and whole again. He looked down at the neat stitches, then he looked up at Evelyn and gave her a very slow, gentle nod of his head to say thank you. Next, Evelyn went over to the small stove. She lit a tiny blue flame and warmed up some thick potato soup she had made the day before. She poured the hot soup into her only clean ceramic bowl and set it on the table. She handed him a metal spoon and told him to eat every single drop because he looked like he had not eaten a hot meal in a long time. Julian sat down and began to eat. The soup was simple, but it was hot and tasted wonderful after weeks on the street. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, watching him with a small, satisfied smile, happy that she could finally help him. When Julian finished the soup, the clock on the wall showed it was past 11 o'clock. Evelyn stood up and pulled a thick wool blanket out of her small closet. She spread the blanket neatly over the small bed against the wall and patted the pillow. She told Julian that the bed was for him tonight. Julian shook his head quickly and pointed toward the lumpy brown couch, trying to tell her that she should take the comfortable bed instead. Evelyn shook her head back at him and smiled softly. She told him that he was the guest under her roof, so he got the bed. She said that she was used to sleeping on the couch anyway, and it was actually very cozy once you got used to the lumps. She lay down on the narrow couch and pulled a thin gray sheet up to her chin, wishing him a good night. Julian stood in the center of the tiny room for a long time, listening to the soft plop of the rain falling into the plastic bucket. He looked at the brave, kind girl sleeping on the hard couch. Then he looked down at his newly repaired coat. He realized that in his search to find the bad people who were stealing his money, he had accidentally stumbled into the greatest treasure he had ever seen. He walked over to the bed, lay down under the thick wool blanket, and promised himself that he would do whatever it took to protect Evelyn from the cold world outside. Early the next morning, the loud buzzing of Evelyn's alarm clock cut through the quiet room. The sun was not even up yet, and the air inside the apartment was freezing. Evelyn immediately threw off her thin blanket and sat up on the lumpy couch. Her back was sore from sleeping on the hard cushions, but she did not complain. She looked over at the small bed and saw Julian lying under the heavy wool blanket, his eyes closed as if he were deep asleep. Evelyn tiptoed across the cold floor so she would not wake him. She put on her work uniform, which was a plain black polo shirt and dark pants that had grown thin at the knees from too much washing. Evelyn worked at a massive grocery store down the street, where she spent 8 hours a day lifting heavy wooden crates of apples and scanning items for grumpy customers. It was hard, painful work that made her arms ache, but she needed every single penny. Before she left the apartment, she fried 2 eggs in a small metal pan, placed them on a clean plate, and left a small note next to the stove that told Julian to eat before the food got cold. Then she quietly closed the wooden door and walked down the creaking stairs into the dark morning fog. The moment the front door of the apartment building clicked shut, Julian opened his eyes. He sat up quickly, his movements sharp and fast. He looked at the plate of hot food she had left for him, and then he looked at the little handwritten note. A strange feeling hit his chest. He was a man who owned entire skyscrapers, but nobody had ever made sure he had breakfast just because they cared about him. He ate the food quickly, pulled on his torn brown coat, and walked out into the chilly morning. Julian did not walk toward the grocery store. Instead, he turned down a narrow, dirty side street where the big apartment buildings turned into old brick warehouses. Parked in a dark corner behind a pile of broken wooden pallets was a large, dusty white delivery van. It looked completely normal from the outside, like a van that delivered heavy boxes of paper towels or car parts. Julian walked up to the back doors of the van and knocked 3 times, then paused and knocked 2 more times. The heavy metal doors immediately slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the van did not look like a delivery truck at all. It looked like a top-secret command room from a spy movie. The walls were lined with bright blue computer screens that cast a glow over everything, and the air smelled like expensive electronics and fresh black coffee. Sitting in a spinning leather chair was Thomas, Julian's most trusted assistant. Thomas wore a perfect grey suit and a neat blue tie. When Thomas saw Julian standing there in his dirty rags and messy beard, he quickly stood up and bowed his head with deep respect. Thomas told Julian that it was good to see him safe. He reached over and handed Julian a sleek black tablet computer that was displaying rows and rows of red numbers. Thomas said that their secret search had finally found the leak in the company bank accounts. He pointed a clean finger at the top of the glowing screen. Julian took the tablet, his face turning completely serious. He asked Thomas to tell him exactly who was taking the money and how they were doing it. His voice was no longer silent or soft, and sounded like the voice of a king who ruled a kingdom. Thomas explained that the person stealing from the Apex Industries charity fund was indeed Marcus Vane. Thomas said that Marcus had found a secret back door in the company computer system. Every single week, Marcus was moving thousands of dollars into a hidden bank account in another country. Thomas looked up from the screen and told Julian that Marcus had just moved a massive chunk of money yesterday morning. He said that Marcus used that exact stolen money to buy the giant diamond ring for Priscilla and to rent the expensive sports cars he was driving around the city. Thomas said they had more than enough proof to call the police and put Marcus in handcuffs right this second. Julian stared at the red numbers on the tablet for a long time. The bright blue light from the screen reflected in his dark eyes. He slowly shook his head and handed the tablet back to Thomas. He told Thomas that they were not going to call the police today. Thomas looked completely shocked. He asked Julian why they should wait. He said that Marcus was a thief who was stealing money meant for poor children, and he was using it to buy fancy things for a mean girl. Thomas argued that every day they waited meant Marcus could steal even more money from the company. Julian sat down in a leather chair and crossed his big arms. He told Thomas that if they arrested Marcus today, Marcus would just hire an expensive lawyer. The lawyer would find a way to get Marcus out of jail on bail, and Marcus would pretend it was all a big mistake. Julian said he did not want Marcus to just get a small punishment. He wanted Marcus to go away for a very, very long time, where no amount of money could ever save him. Julian explained the heavy federal laws to Thomas. He said that if a thief steals a certain amount of money, it is a regular crime. But if the thief crosses a specific line and takes a massive amount all at once, it becomes a major federal crime. If they waited until Marcus tried to move his biggest transfer yet, Marcus would trigger a special law that meant he would go to a high-security prison for the rest of his life, with absolutely no chance of getting out early. Beginning to understand his boss's brilliant mind. But then he asked when Marcus was planning to make that final, massive transfer. Julian smiled a cold, sharp smile that did not reach his eyes. He told Thomas that Marcus was planning to move $50 million on the exact day of the big joint wedding reception. He said that Marcus wanted to use that money to show off in front of the whole city and make Evelyn look poor. Julian stood up and looked out the small, dark window of the van. He told Thomas to let Marcus keep thinking he was a criminal genius for a few more weeks. He wanted Marcus to feel like he was on top of the world, right until the very second the trap snapped shut at the altar. He wanted the proud stepfamily to watch their entire dream turn to dust in front of high society, ensuring they could never hurt Evelyn ever again. The bright white lights of the grocery store made Evelyn's eyes burn, and the store was filled with the loud clatter of shopping carts and the constant, annoying beep of the checkout scanners. Evelyn stood behind her cash register, her feet aching inside her thin shoes. She had been scanning heavy bags of dog food and boxes of cereal for 6 hours without a break. The air smelled like crushed mint leaves and soapy floor wax. Just as she was about to reach for a new stack of plastic bags, a loud smash echoed through the front aisle. A jar of expensive red pasta sauce had shattered on the shiny linoleum floor, splashing thick red liquid all over the clean white display shelves. Standing right next to the mess was Priscilla. She was wearing a fluffy pink coat and holding her designer purse high above the puddle. She did not look sorry at all. Instead, she pointed a finger covered in heavy gold rings straight at Evelyn and began to shout so loudly that every single customer in the store stopped, walking to look. Priscilla screamed that Evelyn had pushed a shopping cart right into her, causing her to drop her items. She called Evelyn a clumsy, careless girl who did not belong in a nice store. Evelyn came out from behind her register, her face turning red with embarrassment. She told Priscilla quietly that she had been standing behind her counter the entire time and had not even touched a cart. She asked Priscilla why she was telling lies in front of all these strangers. Before Priscilla could answer, the heavy office door at the back of the store slammed open. Mr. Henderson, the store manager, came marching down the aisle. He was a short, angry man with a bald head and a shirt that was always soaked with sweat at the collar. He loved to yell at the workers because it made him feel powerful, and he always took the side of rich customers. He looked at the broken red glass on the floor, then he looked at Priscilla's expensive clothes, and finally he glared at Evelyn with absolute fury. Mr. Henderson told Evelyn that he was completely sick and tired of her causing problems. He said that a valuable customer like Priscilla should never have to deal with a rude worker. Evelyn tried to explain that Priscilla had dropped the jar on purpose, but Mr. Henderson raised his hand to shout over her voice. He told her to shut her mouth right now, or he would throw her out into the street without paying her for the week. Victoria walked through the automatic sliding doors of the store. She did not look like she was there to buy food. She held a thick brown envelope in her hand and walked over to the group with slow, heavy steps. She looked at Evelyn with a cold, satisfied smile. She did not even look at the broken glass on the floor. She pulled a piece of paper out of the envelope and pressed it hard against Evelyn's chest. Victoria told Evelyn that she was there to collect what was owed. She said that before Evelyn's father passed away, the family had spent $50,000 on Evelyn's school clothes, her food, and her bedroom. Victoria called it a formal family debt. She said that if Evelyn did not pay back every single dollar by the end of the week, the previous contract for her grandmother's hospital room would become completely worthless. Victoria ruggedly argued that a girl who had hidden debts could not legally hold a trust fund, meaning the hospital would kick the old woman out anyway. Evelyn felt all the blood leave her face. Her hands shook as she looked at the fake numbers written on the paper. She told Victoria that this was completely unfair and illegal. She had worked since she was 15 years old to pay for her own things, and this debt was completely made up. She begged her stepmother to leave her grandmother out of their fights. Priscilla laughed and told Evelyn that she should start looking for a second job, though she doubted any other place would hire someone so useless. Mr. Henderson nodded his head in agreement with Priscilla. He told Evelyn that he was going to write a formal report to the main corporate office tonight, and he promised her that when she walked into work tomorrow morning, her firing papers would be waiting for her on his desk. Victoria and Priscilla turned around and walked out of the store, their loud laughter echoing through the parking lot. Evelyn went home that night in a state of complete terror. She did not even tell Julian what had happened because she did not want to worry him. She just sat on the lumpy couch, staring at the floor until it was time to go to sleep. But while Evelyn was worrying, Julian was acting from the shadows. Later that evening, he met his assistant Thomas in the dusty white delivery van. When Thomas told Julian about what Victoria and Mr. Henderson had done at the store, Julian's face became as hard as stone. He did not say a word, but his eyes were filled with a dark, dangerous light. He picked up a special phone and made a single call to the highest directors of the massive corporation that owned the grocery store chain. Julian did not just ask them for a favor. He told them exactly what was going to happen the next morning, and his voice was so powerful that the directors on the other end of the line trembled with fear. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the grocery store with a heavy heart. She was certain she was about to lose her only source of income. She walked into the back office where Mr. Henderson was sitting in his chair with a massive, cruel grin on his face. He held up a pink piece of paper and told Evelyn that her time was officially up. He told her to pack her things in a cardboard box and get out of his store forever. Before Evelyn could even take the paper, the office door opened again. A tall woman named Ms. Albright walked in. She was wearing an incredibly sharp grey suit, and she held a leather folder under her arm. Two strong men in dark suits stood right behind her. Mr. Henderson's jaw dropped, and he jumped out of his chair so fast he knocked his coffee mug over. He knew exactly who she was. Ms. Albright was the top executive director for the entire regional division of the corporation. Mr. Henderson started to stutter, asking Ms. Albright why. She was visiting his small store without telling him first. He tried to show off by pointing at Evelyn, saying he was just cleaning up the store by firing a terrible worker. Miss Albright looked at Mr. Henderson with eyes that were colder than ice. She told him to be quiet. She pulled a document from her folder and laid it on the desk. She told Mr. Henderson that the main corporate office had just finished a secret audit of his store. They had found out that he had been treating the workers like garbage and failing to keep the store safe. She told him that he was fired immediately, effective right this second, and the two men in suits escorted the crying manager out of the building. Evelyn stood there completely frozen. Not knowing what to think, Miss Albright turned to her, and her face suddenly became warm and friendly. She took Evelyn's hand and told her that the higher-up bosses at Apex Industries had been watching her hard work for a long time. She said that because of her incredible dedication, the company was promoting Evelyn to be the new regional director for the entire district. Miss Albright opened her folder and pulled out a large, official corporate check. She handed it to Evelyn. She said it was a special signing bonus for her new position. Evelyn looked down at the paper and saw the number $50,000 written in clear black ink. Evelyn burst into tears of pure joy, holding the check tightly against her chest. She realized she could pay off the fake family debt today and keep her grandmother safe forever. Albright and asked why the big company was being so kind to her. Ms. Albright just smiled softly and said that sometimes a guardian angel watches over good people who deserve a break. When Evelyn returned to her tiny apartment that evening, she was practically glowing with happiness. She ran inside and showed the massive check to Julian, telling him the whole story about her amazing luck and her new job. Julian sat on the edge of the couch, listening to her excited voice with deep attention. He did not say a word, but as he looked at her beautiful smiling face, a quiet, gentle smile appeared behind his thick beard. He knew her grandmother was safe, and he felt a deep warmth in his chest, knowing that his secret power had given her the true happiness she deserved. Evelyn walked up the long stone driveway of the family mansion, her boots making a soft crunching sound on the gravel. Inside her small fabric purse, she tightly gripped the paper check for $50,000. The large iron gates of the estate usually made her feel small and afraid, but today she held her head high. She walked right through the heavy front doors without knocking, determined to finish her business and go back to her quiet home. She entered the grand living room and stopped. The space was filled with the strong scent of lavender perfume and expensive new leather furniture, and Marcus was sitting around a long glass table that was completely covered in glossy wedding magazines and fabric samples. A young woman holding a silver tablet computer sat at the end of the table, writing down notes. Nobody looked up when Evelyn walked in, so she walked straight to the center of the room. Evelyn reached into her purse, pulled out the clean white check, and slid it across the smooth glass table. It stopped right in front of Victoria's coffee cup. Evelyn told her stepmother that the family debt was now paid in full, down to the very last penny. She demanded that Victoria hand over the official signed paper proving that her grandmother's hospital room was safe for the next 5 years. Victoria picked up the check with 2 fingers, her eyes going wide as she read the numbers. Her hand started to shake slightly, and she looked up at Evelyn with absolute confusion. She asked Evelyn how a poor, useless girl who worked at a grocery store could possibly get $50,000 in a single day. She accused Evelyn of stealing the money or doing something bad to get it. Evelyn did not back down. She looked her stepmother straight in the eyes and explained that honesty and hard work actually mattered to some people. She said that the big bosses at the corporate office had noticed her dedication and promoted her to a high position with a large bonus. She told Victoria to stop asking questions, sign the release form, and fulfill her end of the bargain. Victoria bit her lip in anger, snatched a pen, and signed the paper, pushing it toward Evelyn with a look of pure hatred. Priscilla grabbed the check from her mother's hand, her face turning a strange shade of green as she stared at the amount. She threw the check back onto the table and slammed both her hands down, screaming that it was not fair. She turned to Marcus and complained loudly that Evelyn was trying to show off and ruin her special week. Priscilla told Marcus that he needed to do something big right now to prove that they were still the richest and most important people in the city. The young woman with the silver tablet cleared her throat nervously. She told Marcus and Priscilla that if they wanted to lock in the grand ballroom at the Grand Horizon Plaza for the joint wedding reception, they needed to pay a deposit of $2 million by tonight. She warned them that another wealthy family from out of town was waiting to take the date, and the plaza did not wait for anyone. Marcus froze in his chair. His face went completely pale, and a heavy bead of sweat rolled down his cheek, dripping onto his shiny black tie. He pulled at his collar because it suddenly felt too tight. He had spent so much stolen money on Priscilla's giant diamond ring, the luxury sports cars, and his expensive suits that his hidden bank accounts were almost completely empty. He looked at the wedding planner and suggested in a shaky voice that maybe they should look at a smaller, more modest hall on the edge of town. Priscilla stood up so fast her chair slid backward and hit the wall. She yelled at Marcus, asking him if he was crazy. She said she was a vain now, and she refused to get married in a cheap, ugly room like a regular poor person. She reminded him that he promised her a life of luxury and private airplanes. She told him that if he could not even pay for the best plaza in the city, then he was just a big liar who was making her look foolish in front of her sister. Marcus looked trapped and full of rage. He told Priscilla to sit down and stop screaming at him in his face. He rubbed his temples and promised her that he had more than enough money, but it just took time to move millions of dollars between his various international business accounts. He glared at Evelyn, who was standing quietly by the door, and ordered her to take her trash husband and get out of his sight before he had security throw them into the street. Evelyn did not say a word. She just took her grandmother's safe hospital paper, turned around, and walked out into the fresh air, feeling incredibly glad to leave their shouting behind. The moment the front door closed, Marcus pulled his sleek work laptop out of his bag and flipped it open. His fingers were trembling as he typed on the keys. He told Priscilla to be quiet for 5 minutes while he moved some funds around. He logged into the secret backdoor program he had built inside the main computer system of Apex Industries. He looked at the massive screen showing the Children's Charity Fund, which still had millions of dollars inside it. Marcus decided he could not just steal small amounts anymore. He needed to be rich forever right now. Giant wire transfer of $50 million, routing it from the charity office directly into his secret personal account across the ocean. He let out a deep breath and hit the enter key, believing he was the smartest man alive and that nobody would ever catch him. 2 blocks away, inside the dusty white delivery van, a bright red light suddenly began to flash on the master computer screen. A loud, sharp beeping sound filled the small command room. Thomas jumped up from his leather chair, his eyes wide with shock as he stared at the glowing lines of data. He called out to Julian, telling him that the fish had finally taken the entire bait. He pointed at the screen and said that Marcus Vane had just logged into the main system from the mansion and was trying to move $50 million all at once. Julian stood up from his seat, his large frame filling the small space of the van. He looked down at the flashing red numbers. His face was completely calm, but his dark eyes were incredibly sharp and cold. Thomas kept his finger hovering over a big blue button on his desk. He asked Julian if he should press the button to freeze the transfer, lock Marcus out of the network, and send the police cars to the mansion immediately to drag Marcus away in chains. Julian placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder and told him to stop. He said that if they froze the money right now, Marcus's lawyers would just argue in court that it was a simple computer mistake or an accident. Julian explained that they needed the $50 million to actually land inside Marcus's personal bank account. He said that once the stolen money arrived there, Marcus would officially become a major federal thief under the law, and there would be no escape for him. Julian told Thomas to let the massive transfer go through without any interference. He said they would let Marcus use his stolen wealth to pay for the grandest ballroom at the Grand Horizon Plaza. Julian wanted Marcus and the stepfamily to feel completely happy, safe, and powerful for the next few days. He told Thomas that the higher a bad person climbs on a fake tower, the harder they hit the ground when the tower finally breaks apart. He instructed Thomas to coordinate with the federal agents and the executive legal teams to prepare for the day of the joint wedding reception, because that was the exact moment they were going to end this game forever. The night before the big joint wedding reception was incredibly quiet inside the tiny apartment. The cold rain had finally stopped falling, leaving a cool breeze that drifted through the small cracked window pane. Evelyn sat at her small wooden table, carefully counting the remaining paper money from her new grocery store promotion. She wanted to make sure every single dollar for her sick grandmother's future doctor bills was perfectly safe inside her small fabric purse. Her mobile phone on the table vibrated with a loud, harsh buzz, sliding an inch across the smooth wood. The screen lit up with a new message from her stepsister, Priscilla. The message contained a picture of a massive, sparkling gold ballroom filled with crystal statues, shiny mirrors, and towering white flower arrangements that reached all the way to the high ceiling. Underneath the photo, Priscilla had typed a long note. She wrote that the venue looked like a grand palace for a real king and queen, and she told Evelyn to make sure her beggar husband wore his finest, cleanest rags tomorrow so he would not scare the wealthy guests away. Priscilla added that she had even told the heavy security guards at the door to prepare a special cardboard box for Julian to sit on in the dark back corner of the room so nobody would have to look at his dirty face while they ate their expensive dinner. Evelyn felt a sharp, hot sting in her chest, but she refused to let a single tear fall from her eyes. She stared at the cruel words on the glowing screen, her jaw tightening with a quiet anger. She turned her head slowly to look across the tiny room. Julian was sitting quietly on the edge of the lumpy brown couch, using a small white cloth to wipe the dry dust off his old leather boots. He looked so calm and peaceful, completely unaware of the mean things people were saying about him behind his back. Evelyn decided right then and there that she would not let her family humiliate him tomorrow. She would not allow them to treat her new husband like dirt. She stood up from the table, grabbed her faded blue coat from the wooden wall hook, and told Julian that she had to run a quick errand down the street. Julian looked up and gave her a silent, gentle nod of his head, watching her with his deep, sharp eyes as she stepped out of the door and hurried down the creaking wooden stairs into the dark night. Evelyn walked quickly into the cool night air, the street lamps casting long shadows on the wet pavement. She walked 3 long blocks until she reached a small clothing shop with a yellow neon sign that flickered. The store was small and smelled like fresh cotton and laundry soap. It was filled with rows of plain trousers and simple jackets meant for regular working men, not rich tycoons. Evelyn walked down the narrow aisles, her eyes searching the racks until her eyes landed on a simple black suit hanging neatly on a metal hanger. It was not a famous designer label, and the fabric felt a little stiff under her fingers, but it was clean, neat, and completely whole without any tears. The elderly store clerk walked over from behind his counter, wiping his thick glasses with his cloth apron. He looked at Evelyn's tired face and asked if she was looking for a special gift for someone in her family. Evelyn smiled softly and nodded her head. She told the clerk that she needed a nice suit for her husband for a very important party tomorrow night. She said she wanted something that would make him look decent, clean, and proud when he walked into a big room. The clerk looked at the black suit and told her it was a very fine choice for a regular gentleman. He asked her what size her husband wore so they could find the perfect fit. Evelyn paused for a moment, suddenly realizing she did not know Julian's exact clothing measurements. She used her hands to describe his large body to the old man. She explained that her husband was very tall, with shoulders that were as wide and strong as a brick wall, and arms that looked like he could lift heavy wooden boxes all day long without getting tired. The clerk smiled warmly and pulled a large size from the very back of the metal rack. He told her that this particular one would fit a big, strong man perfectly. Evelyn paid the clerk with a few bills from her purse, zipped the black suit into a cheap plastic garment bag, and carried it back to her apartment like it was the most valuable treasure in the world. When she pushed her apartment door open, the tiny room was warm and smelled like the potato soup they had eaten for dinner. Julian looked up from his spot on the couch, his sharp eyes immediately tracking the long plastic bag in her hands. Evelyn walked over to the small bed and carefully laid the garment bag down on the white mattress. She unzipped the plastic slowly, revealing the black jacket and the neat trousers. Her voice was soft and a little nervous as she turned to speak to him. She told Julian to come look at what she had found down the street. She said she knew it was not a grand, expensive suit like the ones Marcus wore, and she knew the material was a bit rough to touch. She explained that she wanted him to have something clean and nice for the Grand Plaza tomorrow because she did not want anyone to look down on him or say mean words to his face. She told him that she bought it with her very own money from her new job promotion, and she really hoped he would like it. Julian stood up from the couch with slow, deliberate steps and walked over to the side of the bed. He did not look at the cheap suit with disappointment or boredom. Instead, he extended his large, rough hand and gently ran his fingers down the sleeve of the jacket. He touched the inexpensive fabric with so much care and respect that it seemed like he was touching royal silk woven with real gold threads. He looked from the black suit directly into Evelyn's eyes, his expression full of a deep, quiet warmth that made Evelyn's heart beat a little faster. Julian took the clothes from her hands and walked into the tiny bathroom to change his clothes. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, nervously tapping her fingers against her knees, wondering if the shoulders would be too tight for his large frame. The bathroom door swung open, and Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Julian stepped out into the dim light of the apartment lamp. The suit was indeed a little tight around his massive, muscular shoulders, and the trousers were just a tiny bit short near his ankles, but he carried himself with so much natural dignity that the cheap clothes looked completely transformed. He stood perfectly straight, his long hair and beard no longer making him look like a poor beggar, but instead making him look like a powerful, ancient king who was hiding in plain sight. He walked over to Evelyn, his heavy boots making a firm, solid sound on the floor. He stopped right in front of her and reached out, placing his large, warm hands gently over hers. He looked directly into her eyes, his face completely serious and strong. He spoke to her in a low, clear voice that sounded like a deep, beautiful bell in the quiet room. Julian told her that she had spent so much time worrying about his safety and trying to protect him from her cruel family. He said that she was the only person in the entire world who had ever looked past his dirty clothes to see a human being who deserved kindness. He told her that she had used her hard-earned money to buy him a beautiful gift, and he would never forget the sweetness of her heart. Julian looked out the small window toward the glowing lights of the city. He promised her that when they walked through the grand doors of the plaza tomorrow, everything was going to change forever. He told her to hold her head high and never look down at her shoes in front of Victoria or Priscilla ever again. Her family would finally learn the truth, and he would make absolutely sure that nobody in the entire world would ever make her feel small or afraid for the rest of her life. Evelyn looked at his strong face and felt a strange, deep sense of safety, believing every single word he said. The Grand Horizon Plaza was blindingly bright. Giant glass lights hung from the gold ceiling like frozen water, throwing sharp flashes of white light over hundreds of guests. The air was warm and smelled heavily of sweet lilies and roasted beef. People in shiny silk dresses and black tuxedos moved around the giant room, laughing and clinking their crystal glasses together. In the very center of the room, standing on a small raised stage, under a mountain of white roses, were Priscilla and Marcus. Priscilla's dress was covered in thousands of tiny silver beads that caught the light every time she moved, looking down at the crowd like she owned the entire city. Evelyn walked through the giant glass doors, holding Julian's arm tightly. She wore a simple dark red dress she had owned for years, and Julian wore the black suit she had bought him from the small shop. The suit was still a little tight across his wide shoulders, but he walked with long, slow, confident steps that made him look completely steady. Evelyn felt her heart pounding against her ribs as the wealthy guests turned their heads to stare at them, whispering behind their hands. But she remembered Julian's words from the night before, so she kept her eyes up, and did not look down at the floor. She wanted to prove to everyone that she was proud to stand next to her husband, no matter what clothes he wore. Priscilla's sharp eyes caught sight of them from across the crowded room. Her big smile instantly turned into a cold, mean smirk. She tapped Marcus on his shoulder and pointed a sharp fingernail toward the entrance. Marcus let out a loud, mocking laugh, swirling the sparkling gold drink inside his glass. Priscilla did not want to just ignore her sister today. She wanted to use this exact moment, when the most important people in the city were watching, to crush Evelyn's pride forever. She stepped away from the flower arrangements and snatched a shiny silver microphone from the hands of the band leader on the stage. The loud screech of the microphone echoed through the massive room, making all the guests stop talking. The music stopped playing, and the entire room went completely quiet. Turning their attention toward the stage, Priscilla held the microphone close to her mouth, her voice sounding incredibly loud and sharp through the big wall speakers. Priscilla spoke into the microphone, telling everyone to look at the entrance door. She said she wanted to welcome two very special, unexpected guests to her beautiful party. She laughed a mean, high-pitched laugh and told the crowd that her sister Evelyn had actually married a poor, unhoused beggar from the dark alleyways, and she had brought him here today in a cheap suit to ruin the family's beautiful wedding photos. The wealthy guests began to chuckle and whisper to each other, looking at Julian's tight jacket and Evelyn's plain red dress with deep disgust. Victoria stepped up onto the stage next to Priscilla, nodding her head and looking down at Evelyn like she was a piece of trash that had accidentally blown into the clean room. Priscilla kept talking, her voice dripping with mean satisfaction. She said she felt so incredibly sorry for Evelyn, because while she was going to live in a grand mansion with Marcus, Evelyn would be counting pennies just to buy a single loaf of bread with a man who could not even speak a single word. She looked directly at Evelyn and told her into the microphone that her beggar husband should learn to love the taste of cheap ramen because that was the only thing he would ever eat for the rest of his life. Evelyn felt a hot wave of anger rise up from her chest, turning her cheeks bright red. She looked around at all the rich people who were laughing at them, but then she looked up at Julian. Julian was not hanging his head in shame. He stood perfectly still, his large body like a solid stone wall behind her. His dark eyes were fixed on the stage, completely calm and freezing cold. Evelyn refused to let them see her cry. She took a big step forward, leaving Julian's side for a second, and shouted across the quiet room toward the stage. Evelyn told Priscilla that she should be ashamed of herself for using her wedding day to hurt other people. She said that a real marriage was built on kindness and staying together through hard times, not on showing off expensive dresses and stealing people's dignity. She told her sister that all the gold in the world could not buy a good heart, and she was truly happy with Julian because he was a gentle man who knew how to treat people with real respect. Marcus stepped forward to the very edge of the stage, puffing out his chest so his giant gold watch caught the white light from the ceiling. He took the microphone from Priscilla's hand and spoke in a loud, arrogant voice that filled the entire room. He told Evelyn that her sweet words did not mean anything in high society. He said that an expensive place like the Grand Horizon Plaza was only for important people with millions of dollars in their bank accounts, not for dirty people from the streets. Marcus looked down at Julian with absolute hatred and pride. He raised his left hand and signaled to three large, heavy security guards who were standing by the double doors in matching black suits. Marcus ordered the guards to come over right now. He told them to grab the homeless man by his arms and throw him out of the grand ballroom immediately. Marcus screamed into the microphone that Julian belonged in the dark back kitchen with the garbage, where he could wash the dirty plates with the other poor servants instead of breathing the same air as the wealthy guests. The three large security guards started walking fast across the polished floor, their heavy black shoes making a scary thumping sound. They moved in a circle around Evelyn and Julian, reaching out their big hands to grab Julian's shoulders. The rich guests leaned forward, smiling and waiting to watch the poor beggar get dragged away in complete shame. Evelyn stood right in front of Julian, holding her arms out to block the guards, her eyes flashing with a fierce desire to protect her husband. But Julian gently placed his large, warm hand on her shoulder and pulled her safely behind his back, stepping forward to face the guards completely alone. The three heavy security guards raised their big hands, ready to grab Julian's black jacket, wrapping her arms around Julian from behind, preparing for a terrible fight. But before the guards could even touch a single thread of Julian's suit, a sound like a loud clap of thunder echoed through the massive room. The giant glass double doors of the ballroom did not just swing open, they were slammed back against the white walls so hard that two of the large mirrors cracked from top to bottom. Everyone in the ballroom jumped in surprise, turning their heads away from Julian to look at the entrance. A long line of men in dark blue jackets and heavy black boots came marching into the room. They had shiny gold badges pinned to their chests and serious, angry faces. Behind them came another group of men wearing sharp grey suits, holding heavy leather folders. The rich guests quickly scrambled backward, pushing their gold chairs out of the way to create a wide path. The three security guards who had been surrounding Julian immediately dropped their hands and took 3 steps back, their faces turning pale with fear as they realized these new men were federal police officers. Marcus stood on the raised stage, his face twisting with confusion. He grabbed the microphone again and shouted down at the officers, his voice shaking slightly through the speakers. He demanded to know why they were interrupting his private party. He pointed his finger at Julian and told the officers that if they were looking for a criminal, they should arrest the dirty beggar standing in the middle of the room instead of bothering important business people. The lead officer did not even look at Julian. He marched straight past the tables, his heavy boots making a loud, steady thumping sound on the polished floor. He walked right up the steps of the stage, followed by 4 other strong officers. Before Marcus could even lower his hand, the lead officer grabbed Marcus's left arm, twisted it tightly behind his back, and pushed his face down hard against the glass table. The expensive white roses and crystal vases wobbled and crashed to the floor, splashing water all over Marcus's shiny black suit. A loud, sharp click echoed through the quiet room as the metal handcuffs were locked tightly around Marcus's wrists. Marcus began to scream and kick his feet, shouting that this was a massive mistake. He yelled that he was a wealthy partner at Vein Logistics and that he had millions of dollars in his international accounts. He threatened to fire every single officer in the room the moment his legal team arrived. The lead officer pulled Marcus up by his collar, making him stand straight in front of the quiet crowd. The officer took the silver microphone from the table and spoke in a loud, clear voice that filled every single corner of the grand ballroom. He told everyone in the room to listen carefully. He announced that Marcus Vane was not a rich businessman, and he did not own a single dollar of his own. The officer explained that Marcus was just a low-level worker who had been caught stealing $50 million from the special charity fund of Apex Industries. He said that Marcus had used that stolen money, which was supposed to buy food and medicine for poor children, to buy his expensive watch, his sports cars, and to pay for this very wedding party. A giant gasp went through the entire room. The wealthy guests looked at Marcus with wide, horrified eyes, suddenly stepping even further away from the stage. Priscilla stood completely frozen next to her mother, her mouth hanging wide open. Her face turned from a happy pink color to a dull, sick gray. She shook her head quickly and grabbed the officer's sleeve, screaming that he was telling lies. She said that Marcus was a billionaire and that the giant diamond ring on her finger was real proof of his wealth. The officer gently but firmly pushed Priscilla's hand away from his jacket. He looked down at her with cold eyes and told her that the giant diamond ring was bought with the exact money Marcus had stolen from the children's fund. He told Priscilla that under the law, every single item Marcus had touched or bought with that money was now being seized by the government. Pay back the giant debt. He told Priscilla that she had to take the ring off her finger and hand it over right this second, or she would be arrested for keeping stolen property. Priscilla looked down at her glittering ring, her whole body shaking with terror. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, ruining her heavy makeup and leaving dark streaks on her face. She slowly pulled the heavy ring off her finger and dropped it into the officer's open hand, feeling as if her entire life was ending right there on the stage. Victoria stepped forward, her voice high and sharp with panic. She told the officer that even if Marcus was a thief, her own family business was completely clean. She demanded that the officers leave the stage and let her family go home to their mansion, opening a heavy leather folder. He looked at Victoria and told her that she was completely wrong. He explained that just 2 days ago, Victoria had signed a business contract with Marcus to merge their family logistics company together. He said that Victoria had used her massive family mansion as collateral to help Marcus get more loans from the bank. Because Marcus's accounts were now completely empty and frozen by the government, the bank was taking the family mansion and the family business away today to pay off the massive bills. The man told Victoria that she and Priscilla had exactly 24 hours to pack their clothes into cardboard boxes and leave the estate forever. Priscilla let out a loud, piercing scream that sounded like a wild animal. She fell to her knees on the hard floor, her beautiful silver-beaded dress tearing at the bottom as she hit the wood. She began to cry and sob loudly, realizing that she was no longer a wealthy bride who was going to fly on private airplanes. She was completely broke. Her future husband was going to a dark prison for the rest of his life, and her family was about to be kicked out onto the streets with absolutely nothing left. Victoria collapsed into a nearby chair, covering her face with her shaking hands, unable to say a single word as the officers began to drag a crying Marcus out through the giant double doors. The giant ballroom became completely quiet after the officers dragged Marcus out through the heavy double doors. The only sound left in the massive room was the soft, messy sobbing of Priscilla, who was still sitting on the polished wooden floor with her silver-beaded dress torn and ruined around her knees. Victoria sat frozen in her gold chair, her hands pressed tightly over her mouth as she stared at the empty space where her wealthy future had just disappeared. All the rich guests stood around the edges of the room, whispering to each other and pointing their fingers at the ruined stepfamily. Evelyn stood in the center of the floor, her heart beating fast, still holding onto Julian's strong arm, because her legs felt like they were about to give out from the shock. Evelyn turned her head to look at Julian, her voice a small, shaky whisper in the quiet room. She told him that they should leave this place right now. She said that her grandmother was safe, the family debt was paid, and there was no reason for them to stay in this terrible house of lies any longer. She started to pull his arm toward the exit, but Julian did not move a single inch. He stood as solid as a mountain, his dark eyes looking toward the giant glass windows that faced the front driveway of the plaza. Suddenly, a bright flash of white light filled the room from the outside. The sound of heavy tires rolling over the wet gravel echoed through the walls. A long line of 5 sleek, shiny black Maybach cars drove slowly up to the very front entrance of the plaza, and they had dark black windows that completely hid the people inside. The rich guests crowded around the windows, their eyes wide with surprise, as they wondered what incredibly important person was arriving at the party now. The doors of the black cars opened all at once, and 10 men wearing flawless dark suits and matching blue ties stepped out into the cool air. Standing at the front of the group was Thomas, the assistant from the dusty white delivery van. He was no longer hiding in the shadows. He walked with long, proud steps right through the giant double doors of the ballroom, his polished leather shoes making a firm sound against the floor. 2 of his men walked right behind him, carefully carrying a large, heavy garment case made of smooth black leather and gold zippers. The crowd of wealthy guests quickly stepped backward, creating a wide, empty path for Thomas and his team. Thomas marched straight through the center of the room, completely ignoring Victoria and Priscilla. He stopped right in front of Julian, stood perfectly straight, and bowed his head with the deepest respect Evelyn had ever seen. The 10 men behind him all bowed at the exact same time. Thomas spoke in a loud, clear voice that echoed off the high gold ceiling, telling Julian that the entire corporate operation was completely finished. He said that Marcus Vane was currently in the back of a police car, and every single dollar belonging to the Apex Industries Children's Charity Fund had been safely locked back into the main bank accounts. Thomas closed his folder and told Julian that his massive global empire was waiting for his command. Priscilla stopped crying for a second, lifting her messy face from the floor. She stared at Thomas, her eyes blinking rapidly as she recognized his face from the big business news channels on the television. She looked from Thomas over to Julian, her voice coming out as a tiny, confused squeak. She asked her mother why the top executive assistant of the biggest company in the country was bowing down to a dirty beggar who lived under a plastic tarp in the alley. Julian did not answer Priscilla. Instead, he slowly let go of Evelyn's hand and stood up completely straight. In that single second, The quiet, submissive posture of the poor homeless man completely vanished. He looked incredibly tall and powerful, his wide shoulders filling the space of the room. He reached up with his large hands and slowly slid his arms out of the tight black jacket Evelyn had bought him from the small shop the night before. He did not throw the cheap jacket onto the floor. He folded it with immense care, smoothing out the fabric with his fingers, and handed it gently to Thomas. Julian told Thomas in his deep, beautiful voice to hold onto the jacket and keep it completely safe inside his private office, because it was bought with true kindness and was the most valuable thing he owned in the entire world. Thomas took the cheap jacket like it was made of solid gold and zipped it safely away. The two men opened the leather garment case and pulled out a bespoke tuxedo jacket that was threaded with tiny, sparkling diamonds along the collar. Julian slid his arms into the luxurious new coat. It fit his massive shoulders perfectly, making him look like a true king who had finally taken his place on the throne. Julian turned his sharp, dark eyes toward the stage, looking down at Victoria and Priscilla. His voice was no longer silent. It was a commanding, powerful sound that made everyone in the room hold their breath. He told Priscilla that Marcus Vane was a foolish thief who had been trying to buy her love with his pocket change. He revealed to the horrified crowd that his true name was Julian Vance, and he was the sole owner and master of Apex Industries. He said he had spent weeks living in the dark alleyways to catch the greedy people who were hurting his company, and he had seen the true colors of everyone in the city. Julian walked over to the glass table and looked down at Victoria, who was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. He told her that she had wanted to throw him into the dark kitchen to wash the dirty plates with the servants because she thought he was nothing. He pulled a thick piece of official blue paper from Thomas's leather folder and laid it flat on the table. Julian explained that when the bank took away the family mansion and the family business from them today because of Marcus's debts, he had immediately signed a check to buy the entire estate for himself. He said he now owned every single brick of their house, every single desk in their office, and even the very chairs they were sitting on. Julian turned away from the sobbing stepfamily and walked back over to Evelyn. Her jaw was slightly open, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of confusion and wonder as she looked at her new husband in his diamond coat. Freezing expression instantly softened into a gentle, warm smile the moment he looked at her face. He reached out and took her small hands back into his big, warm grip. He told Evelyn that she had spent so much time trying to protect him from the cold world, never knowing that he had the power to buy the entire city. He said that the man who had shared her tiny, leaking room, the man who had eaten her hot potato soup, and the man who loved her with all his heart was completely real. He promised her that her days of working until her feet bled were officially over. He picked up the official blue deed to the family mansion and the logistics business and placed it gently inside her fabric purse. He told her that the entire family empire now belonged to her, and she could do whatever she wanted with it because she was the true queen of his life. Evelyn looked down at the paper in her purse, then up into Julian's bright, steady eyes. She realized that her long nightmare of fear and sadness was finally over, her eyes shining with tears of pure happiness. Julian bent down, gently kissed the back of her hand, and led her slowly toward the grand exit. The wealthy guests all bowed low as the couple walked past, opening the doors for them with deep respect. Julian and Evelyn stepped into the front black Maybach car, leaving the greedy step-family ruined in the dust behind them, as they drove away into a brand new life of unimaginable luxury and perfect love.